Hello, welcome to Movie Marathon Mood, the show where we watch movies and talk about them. It's as simple as that. And today we're talking Empire Strikes Back. Is it as dark as its reputation would have you believe? And does it hold up as one of the best of the entire saga? And the original trilogy comes to a mighty conclusion in Return of the Jedi. Is it the weak link in the original trilogy, or is it just as good as the other two? We talk about this and more today on Movie Marathon Mood. Stay tuned.
They cross trackless voids to unknown worlds. A galactic odyssey against oppression. A big, new, sprawling space adventure in the Star Wars saga, The Empire Strikes Back. Coming to your galaxy next summer.
Hello again, Jesse Ghosttrap here with my pal, brother, Drew Cordell. Drew, we're back for our only episode that's fully the original trilogy.
Yeah, and a double dose of goodness as it would be whichever way you sliced it in this trilogy. If it was two from it, but yeah, definitely a fun back to back with Empire and Jedi. Really, the ultimate back to back. I think out of this whole series.
Well, what's interesting too, obviously, as we discussed, both of us grew up with the original trilogy, and I don't remember watching them for the first time. It's just all Star Wars.
Right.
It just is what it is. But these two exist kind of to themselves a little bit
Yeah.
because they were made to be the end of this trilogy essentially, and made with the cliffhanger obviously at the end of Empire,
Right.
so they really fit together, whereas the original Star Wars A New Hope, it just completes a story.
Yeah.
And obviously there are parts of it that you could bring forward, including the fact that Vader doesn't die.
Right.
So there's obviously those aspects that could be carried out, but it tells a complete narrative. And here we are with Empire and Jedi made to be in a series. So they really work together. And I feel like I've seen them as a double feature different times in the past as well. One of the most notable being Celebration 2 in Indianapolis, where watched it with a whole bunch of fellow Star Wars fans, me and my family, and a whole bunch of Star Wars fans watching Empire and Jedi on a big screen. And that was a whole lot of fun, to watch them.
Yeah.
These movies that I've grown up with, watching them with all the fans like that. I'm curious, before we even get started, which versions you watched. Did you continue, I assume, watching the theatrical cuts from the DVD?
I did. But I also did watch a little bit of the Disney Plus streams just for reference for a few of the changes that had happened over the course of time. But one in particular in Jedi that I just wanted to see for myself because I knew it happened. I knew it was present, but I had never actually watched the scene, so I wanted to see it with this change
Right.
and see if it was as negative a change as I thought it was, and I really didn't care for it, but still, all the same, I don't think that. I think if I would have watched it on streaming, I wouldn't have been like, "Oh, it's a F now because they changed this change happened around the blue now." it doesn't negatively like completely change the movie or anything. It just kind of negatively affects one scene, but that's it. And I'll talk about it later when we're talking about Jedi. But no, I did roll with the theatrical. Those are the ones that I have definitely seen the most. And I've only because when I grew up, the VHSs I had like the original VHSs and then the THX remastered VHXs they came out with of the original trilogy. And because I already had two copies of those, my parents didn't fork out the money for the special editions when they came out on VHS. So I only saw those in theaters. And it wasn't until the DVD editions came out that I um, owned like versions, the different versions. And still, it was yet another different version because Lucas had made more changes. And I never got the Blu-ray, so I haven't seen like the special editions nearly as much as the theatrical, and I haven't watched the movies with the Blu-ray changes or even further changes that they've made in between time now that it's on Disney Plus.
Well, like you said, I don't think the special editions ruin the movies by any stretch of the imagination,
Not at
even
all.
though I do think it's worth putting in context, especially for those who haven't seen the theatrical versions. That I think the theatrical versions are easily the ones worth watching. It's just unfortunate that they're not legally available in a super high quality.
Right.
And now we have, the difference between the letterbox DVD nonsense with
Yeah.
2.0 sound compared to the 4K Atmos that's now available on Disney Plus.
Right.
Uh, it's a very big difference in quality availability, and it's frustrating trying to make that decision. If you're like, do I watch it in as high a quality as I can, or do I watch this DVD to preserve the theatrical? And I've made both decisions many times in the past, but this time I went with the Disney Plus streams uh, just to watch for these particular reviews.
Right.
And Empire is the one that it has the most minimal of changes.
Yeah.
The changes that exist in it are very small. Probably the biggest change of them all is the addition of Ian McDermott uh, as the Emperor,
Right.
just in the hologram sequence, and some changes there as well. But like that, just putting Ian McDermott in there, it's obvious enough why they would do that. But there's something about watching what was originally done and not wanting
Right.
to erase that history either.
Yeah.
I think I mentioned it back on the prequels, but uh, worth stating again, especially right here with The Empire Strikes Back, is that uh, Lucas made so much money with the first Star Wars movie and had made such a good deal for himself that he was able to make Lucasfilm truly its own company, much more so than it even had been before,
Yeah.
and building not just Lucasfilm to produce movies, but having Industrial Light and Magic start really becoming a bigger thing,
Right.
and Skywalker Sound, and these things are stuff that people don't always think about in terms of what did Disney buy when they bought Lucasfilm. So they didn't just buy Star Wars; they bought a big company with other intellectual property, but they also bought leading visual effects and sound houses, you
Right.
know, which really got a chance to blossom here. So Lucas got out of the director's seat because he was still very much involved with the movie, but had so much on his plate in terms of building the entire production facility, building up the behind the scenes business side of things too,
Right.
which is really where he put a lot of his focus for a long time after as well. And what a crazy thing that these movies were basically independently produced. Lucasfilm funded the production and Fox had the distribution rights. But Lucasfilm owned the movies, and that's where it got really weird there for a while, um, where Fox still had A New Hope, but now it's back in the hands of Disney because Disney bought Fox.
Right, right.
Um, but yeah, I think it's very apparent. You watch this movie, just thinking about its place in history. Lucas was very much not just trying to make it bigger and better, but fully having control over the narrative and really building his world and allowing that to be what Star Wars is.
Right.
Empire Strikes Back deepens and broadens the scope of what the Star Wars galaxy is, and obviously does so in a very fun fashion. But it also does things like we're going to open with a battle in an ice planet,
Yep.
which is just insane in terms of visual effects and what the boundaries could have been, because they could have just done just a little bit better versions of what they'd done in the first film. And instead they're like, Lucas said, no, we're gonna do this in an ice planet where you're gonna have the matte out white, have ships and things flying around with a white backdrop,
Right.
which is a lot harder than the blackness of space.
Yeah.
uh, he really went for it, and that is definitely testament to Lucas wanting in all the Star Wars movies to do bigger and grander things and pushing the boundaries of technology. And then, like I said, on the story front, really expanding what Star Wars is, but still very much existing in the space opera. Really, even more so
Yeah.
being a space opera with Empire Strikes Back. What say you, my friend, about Empire?
Well, it's when you think about it, it runs on a really kind of amazing balance of urgency and having the ability to stop and breathe, because this movie moves at a very fast pace. There's so many things that happen. Like you said, like at the beginning, it's like not very long into it, we have the Battle of Hoth, and it's this incredible sequence, and the action and adventure in this movie, the space opera elements of it are very top notch. It's definitely not a step down from A New Hope in any means. Maybe it doesn't have like the amazing climax in terms of scope and action that A New Hope did, but it operates on a different level, and it delivers a satisfying, well, maybe not narratively satisfying, but a very good conclusion to to this movie. So it does all that, but it also has these characters that loved from the first and brings them further in, and we really get to know Luke. We really get to know Han and Leia. We get to know Vader. It's very interesting that we get to see a lot of things actually from Vader's point of view in this movie, or at least like the scenes with Vader are very much about him and not him just being the bad guy in the room. And I think that makes this operate on a grand level too. Just kind of getting to know the villain, not even with the reveal in mind, uh, because if you don't know that, it is, which I don't know who doesn't know that at this point. And if you've been listening to this and never seen the movie, you already know. But like, not even knowing that he's Anakin, you it's just really cool to get this glimpse into Vader, without Tarkin, without someone there to kind of hold him back. Like anybody fells him, he just kills them. Like Admiral Ozzel, at the beginning, jumping, coming out of light speed too soon gives the rebels time to prepare, uh, to escape for the battle, and he force chokes him to death. Later on, Captain Nita fails, and Captain Nita is definitely a lot more pleasant, a lot more competent than Ozzel, but it doesn't matter. He still gets killed too. And Admiral Piet, Piet moves up to Admiral through all that, and you think he's gonna eventually kind of get choked out too at the end, but narrowly escapes that fate because Vader's too preoccupied thinking about other things. But that is just one of the many things that pushes this one over the edge, and makes it so good, is that Vader is not just the bad guy. Like, there we get a little bit of motivation, a little bit of insight to him, and that really does make this movie even better than it would be without that. Because it would still be a really good movie. It would, you know, I would venture to say it would still be a great movie. That is kind of the extra thing on top, that cherry on top that really makes this as good as it is. I think that, and I think Carrie Fisher and Harrison Ford are good in all these movies, but I think we get the best performance of the saga from both of them respectively in this movie, because the way it's written with all their kind of flirtatious fighting, um, the absolute kind of sexual tension between them, but the genuine care they have for each other too, um, also puts this one over the edge as well, because there's just so many genuine character moments between them. Of course, there's the kiss, or the that 3PO ruins, um, but everything leading up to that, I love their fights in Hoth, in the hallways, the corridors, even when they're trying to escape, they're they're constantly bickering and arguing, and it's it's really entertaining, but very true to their characters too. And I think Harrison Ford just, he's got that rogue nature to him, and it really comes across in this one, in those moments like the asteroid field. He's kind of got the smirk. He knows what he's doing. A little cocky. I love, never tell me the odds. It's one of the best lines of the whole saga. It's one of the, something that really kind of sums up Han Solo. He doesn't care about the grander scale of things. He doesn't care about the Force. He doesn't care about odds being stacked against him. He he knows what he can do, and he knows his ship. And as long as he's got that, he has, his life kind of figured out. And I really love that about Han Solo. And I think Harrison just knocks it out of the park in this movie. And of course, there's that whole "I love you, I know" exchange when he gets frozen in carbonite. And of course, that's just an emotional scene. It delivers on uh, a lot of levels because really you don't know if Han's going to make it out of this alive, um, going through the story. And it's kind of like this could be his last words. He could just be, I love you too. I really care about you. Um, but he's still Han Solo. He still says, I know, uh, to Leia. And I love that. And Harrison nails it. And of course, there's the whole story about how in the script it was, I love you too. And they tried it. And Irvin Kershner, the director of this one, who just brilliant, um, recently passed away. But they were trying to get it right. Harrison didn't like the way it was going. He couldn't. He just couldn't really um, vibe with those words being said by Han. And finally, Kirshner was like, "Harrison, do what you want to do." And I know happened, and it's one of the most famous exchanges from this entire saga, and it's brilliant. It's such a great moment. I think Leia shows a lot of strength in this movie. She's just as strong and determined as she was in A New Hope, um, but I think she's got more motivation, more desperation in this. And you see her as a confident leader at the beginning in the Battle of Hoth, and giving the speeches, and her in the control room. But then the Alliance cannot win that battle. There's just almost no way, and she's forced to flee, and then gets stuck with Han, and just seeing how all that goes. But when they're trying to save Han from Boba Fett, uh, she's really the one in charge. And Lando, Billy D. Williams is awesome. I don't have to say anything. Like, he's just cool. He's a cool guy, very awesome, and that's what Lando's supposed to be. Just like charming, cool. And there was like no way Lando, if no Lando or no Billy D. Williams, no Lando, or at least like for these movies, I think Donald Glover did a great job and is a cool Lando. But Billy D. Williams just he is Lando. That character is kind of a cool addition uh, to this movie of another kind of roguish character that we don't know if we can trust or not. And he kind of fills the pre New Hope Han Solo role um, for this, and ends up actually betraying them, but has his conscience kick in and helps them out. But he doesn't. He's trying to just escape, and Leia, takes charge multiple times. They try to save Han, and then they go back for Luke. But I think at the heart of this movie, what makes Empire so good, and I've said that about everything. All these things make it so good, but that's like, if any of these working parts didn't function, this movie would fall apart. But this one is the most essential, and it's Luke. And I think Luke is the heart and soul of this trilogy, but especially the heart and soul of this movie. And Mark Hamill just does such a great job with the sincerity of the way he plays Luke, whether it's the Battle of Hoth, where he loses his co pilot, and you kind of see the, kind of tragic look in his face, like, oh, when he realizes that he's gone. You see the determination to try to win the battle. He's in Luke, and when he does take down AT-AT or at Imperial Walker, whatever you want to call it, very cool vehicle. by the way. Just always been one of the coolest vehicles in Star Wars. It's cool seeing him really kind of taking a confident lead role in the rebellion, but also you have the stuff with Yoda, and you have to realize that uh, Mark Hamill's on a set that is got all this swamp stuff in it, hot and sweaty, and probably smelled awful trying to act with a puppet. But he does it in a way, there is no wink and nudge. Oh yeah, I'm acting with a puppet. No, he reacts to Yoda as if Yoda was a real living being. And I think that just, if any of that didn't work, the movie would probably fall apart. And you got to give Frank Oz credit for that too, because he's a brilliant puppeteer. Going back to the Muppets, and as the voice of so many Muppets, Miss Piggy, um, being probably the most prominent. But he does such a great job as well as Yoda, and not just the voice and the delivery of the lines, because that's a big part of it. But the puppetry itself does a fantastic job with the way Yoda moves, and it just works. And I think actually that's in a documentary. I think Lucas talks about if Yoda didn't work, the whole thing falls apart, and they were able to deliver that. It just makes this movie work on a whole different level, and of course, it all comes together in that final act. I have plenty to say about it too, but kind of curious of if there are any particular things about Empire that really stand out to you, that really do kind of like make it pop, because it is just one of those movies that I think it has a reputation of being the best of the series. And like as I said, right now my favorite is A New Hope, but that has changed over the years, and it's been interchangeable between the original trilogy. And I do think all these movies are on the same level. I think they're all just as good as the other. But I do think that Empire does have something to it, and that definitely deserves all the praise it's gotten.
Well, a lot of attention obviously is paid to the twist of Vader being Luke's father.
Right.
And what blows my mind though is thinking like, can you imagine not knowing who Yoda is?
Right.
That's just kind of funny. You're just watching this crazy little creature and you're like, why did the Muppets take over Star Wars?
Yeah.
This silly little thing.
Right.
Just running around, throwing things, making a mess. But obviously, ultimately, making quite a point and making quite an impact. And that's definitely the heart of the movie, the soul of the movie, and the part where the mysticism of the Force starts to really matter deeply to the story. That Force obviously existed in A New Hope, but it really starts to deepen and
Right.
become that important mystical thing underneath what makes Star Wars what it is. And one of my favorite movie lines of all time is when Yoda says, "Luminous beings are we, not this crude matter," poking Luke and suggesting, obviously, something that like even without the Force, like I think can be applied to our own lives. Where we can limit ourselves and our potential, but uh, just as a story, it's quite something. The Dagobah sequences they're really kind of incredible. Down to like going in this cave and having
Yeah.
something like so kind of dreamlike occur. And it's like, wait, what? Is Vader really there? What's happening? It could really throw you for a loop that way, but it's this kind of surrealistic moment that I just feel like all that stuff really makes Empire what it is in so many ways. But at the same time, it's also just a great machine in terms of the ups and downs of the adventure. There's so many great action bits all throughout it, and it really moves going into the asteroid field and
Yeah.
being under the realization that you're not just inside of an asteroid. That's always cracked me up too. Like how slack jawed was that creature when they flew into its mouth to begin with.
Right.
But uh, one of the other things that jumps out of Empire for me is the production design. That's honestly one of the biggest selling points of what makes this movie special. It just looks incredible, and the sets are unreal, and in so many different types of little places that we are, including Dagobah, but obviously on Cloud City
Yeah.
and all the layers within. That's something we mentioned back on Phantom Menace a bit, obviously, but when they're on Naboo and they're kind of going into these deeper sections during like the lightsaber duel, especially
Right.
in Empire. Obviously, a lot of that happens in Empire where you get into these industrial sections of Cloud City, uh,
Yeah.
and it's just really amazing all the different layers of the production here, and that's something that makes a huge difference because sometimes in like cheaper or lesser science fiction, uh, you don't get a whole lot in the details like that. It's a lot more singular,
Right.
a lot more bland. Sometimes you remove details because you don't want things to look too much like our reality. You want it to look like science fiction, but you don't have the money to like do a whole bunch of different sorts of things. So a lot of sci-fi looks, antiseptic and just very white or bland. And Empire is very far from that. There are so many different parts to how it all looks. And also obviously different creatures and things too, right from the start.
Right.
The Tauntauns, and I do think it's interesting what they added to um, in the special editions for Luke's own harrowing escape
Right.
towards the beginning. Uh, I still wish, like I said before, not to be too repetitive, but the theatrical versions should be made available, and they're kind of the definitive versions. But I kind of really dig the little added touches the special edition did for Empire. And all beneath everything, obviously, is the personality. The personality from the characters really shine and help make this one special.
Right.
Uh, and it's interesting in the sense that they pulled Luke aside. They had these separate adventures as opposed to everybody kind of colliding together. You get all these separate stories, including actually dealing with the Empire, since it's like in the title, the Empire actually has its own storyline and not just the evil guys.
Yeah.
It it's fun to see, obviously Vader just murdering everybody left and right, but at the same time, like it could have obviously gone very sideways to have all these separate storylines, but it all manages to click very well. And you don't really get a whole lot of Mark Hamill interacting with anybody of
Yeah.
the main, cast. With Harrison and with Carrie, he doesn't get to interact with them a whole lot. He's very separated and spent a lot of time with Yoda, and then obviously at the end, briefly seeing his friends before he is confronted with Vader. I think this movie obviously deserves a lot of credit for it's just complete mixture of elements
Yeah.
and the way that it expands the world without getting too lost. It still feels like it's about something. It very easily could have just been all garbage in the sense of like the story's over and we're just making up crap now.
Right.
And instead it manages to kind of launch the galaxy as something more than just what we saw before. And that's such a hard thing to do. You have the original movie that had to exist unto itself, and now they have to do the hat trick of making it work more. And it's funny, like at the time, it was certainly still a big movie. It just wasn't anywhere near as big as the first one and disappointed people. So it's funny how that history has changed and now Empire is the de facto best Star Wars movie for so many people. And I don't know that I've ever said it was my favorite of the Star Wars movies, but it's not like I don't appreciate what it is.
Right.
It's a definitely an excellent movie, and Irvin Kershner is a huge part of that. And at the same time, I think you can't really say that Lucas isn't involved.
Right.
I don't think it's fair when people distance Lucas's involvement from this, the sequels to the original trilogy. He was still very much there, very much leading the charge. He just had to kind of oversee a whole lot else that was going on with Lucasfilm. Very smartly brought in someone like Kirshner,
Yeah.
who is a big part of the personality of the movie, the characterization kind of coming through even more. I think too much is made as well about the movie being dark.
Agreed.
It obviously has darkness in it, and it ends on the cliffhanger, darker kind of note. But it's a very bright movie with a lot of humor and
Right.
a lot of energy in its action. Plus, 3PO is like cracking jokes everywhere he goes.
Right.
That's something you can't really escape. I think Anthony Daniels is great, and he's pretty terrific in Empire. Even when he's uh, not running around like usual, and he's actually put in pieces.
Yeah.
And people talk about Jar Jar as comic relief or being annoying or anything else, and uh, I don't think it's too dissimilar to some of the humor that exists here in Empire.
Right. Yeah. 3PO is another character that probably has like uh, his best outing in this one, because a lot of his humor is just not to say that in Jedi he doesn't have a bunch of hilarious moments, because he does in that too, and have good character moments, but like just the comic timing of so much of the back and forth between Han, Leia, 3PO, Chewie on that adventure is just so on point. The asteroid field, Um, the kiss, the Cloud City when he gets shot, just like bumbling around, and uh, when the other protocol droid says something to him, he's like, "How rude!" Well, I'm pretty sure Jar Jar Binks says "How rude" like 32 times in Phantom Menace, or something like that. So there's similar things for sure. But I agree that Anthony Daniels is pretty great. Um, is 3PO, and definitely that's one thing. I I'm not gonna have a lot of positive things to say about Rise of Skywalker, but that is one positive thing that I do have to say about it is a lot of the 3PO humor kind of came back, or at least for a couple of minutes, a couple of scenes in that I enjoyed. Um, but anyway, the 3PO definitely hilarious in this movie. I think R2 is great in this movie too. Kind of on a different thing. Him and Luke are off on their own, and there's those great bits where R2 gets like swallowed by whatever's in Dagobah, the swamp, and spits him out, and does not like Yoda, who we don't know is Yoda at that point. You made a good point about that. Like, just this little ridiculous creature ends up being this Jedi Master. It's just such a. It kind of goes back to mythology in a way. A lot of old stories where a a god or something takes the form of an animal or something, or something ugly, and the hero underestimates it, and finds out later who it is. It's an old trope, but they make it work so well in Empire with Yoda. And another movie that I think does this in the same vein is Kill Bill, with Hattori Hanzo, where he's kind of this bumbling drunk uh, sushi chef, uh, talking to the bride. Really kind of funny. And then you find out who he is. And I think that really does have a Yoda vibe to it. And I always loved that scene in that movie, but it kind of reminds me of this. And I do think it does work so well. The Before I kind of talk about the ending and what I you know what really makes this work, I got to talk about John Williams again, because I said it like probably objectively. I think A New Hope probably has the best score, because it's just doing so much at all times, because they're having to pull out all the stops for that one. But in the Empire is every bit as good score wise, and has so many great themes. Of course, you got the Imperial March, which is outside of the main Star Wars theme, it's probably the most famous theme from Star Wars. Everybody knows it. Even people that have never watched Star Wars know when they hear the Imperial March what it's from, what it is. You got Yoda's theme, which is also a great theme. You kind of have the love theme between uh, Han and Leia, which is just another great theme. But then you have like all the kind of incidental music happening in the action, like Battle of Hoth, the asteroid chase, and the finale in Cloud City. Um, just all so effective. It's so good. And Williams, you got to think about the streak he was on at this point. I mean, he'd done Jaws, done Star Wars, Close Encounters, Superman, the movie, just to name a few. Um, and so he's knocking out these amazing scores left and right, and it doesn't stop anytime soon because there's a whole bunch of stuff after.
Not just great scores, but iconic scores.
Iconic, yeah, the memorable, absolutely moving, emotional scores. Because immediately after he does Raiders of the Lost Ark, which we're going to talk about soon. E.T., uh, Jedi, and then Temple of Doom, and it just keeps going. I mean, I could sit and name all these great scores. I think my favorite part is just the music at the end, like with the finale, with the escape from Cloud City and everything, um, where they're trying to get Luke and um, everything's kind of counting down. They're trying to escape. It's just so. It's got that same. It's a different type of ticking clock, but it does kind of have that ticking clock structure that A New Hope did. And of course, it's not the same as the Death Star. It's not the same type of thing, but every bit is urgent, and every bit is we gotta escape. Hopefully, they fix the hyperdrive. We gotta scrape out of this. Just this great urgency to it, and the music is just such a big part of that. And then, of course, with the coda at the end, just the emotions running high, it just delivers. And I got to talk about the end because I think, and like you said, people just fixate on the twist, and it's just so much more than that. It's so much more than no, I am your father, and that's what he says. No, I am your father, not Luke. I am your father, which is often misquoted. Just Luke leaving Yoda and Obi-Wan, who is also Alec Guinness is still in this movie, but as a ghost, Force ghost. He rushes to save, Han and Leia, and ends up in this trap. And this is where the sound, Ben Burt really kind of takes the spotlight because in big sections of the lightsaber battle between Luke and Vader, there's no music. That makes it so I go back and forth between what the best lightsaber duel is of the original trilogy between Jedi and Empire because I like them both so much and they work on different levels. Uh, and but the different locations, as you said, the different sounds, sometimes you don't know where Vader is uh, until you hear his breathing and his lightsaber ignite, and just the intensity and the different. They're going in different rooms, all sorts of different things going on. Like you said, the production design is just incredible. Um, but just the emotions running at that point that you get to the twist, and it's more than just a twist, it's just this emotional moment where Luke kind of figures out everything everything he thought was a lie. you know it's just it's a whole different ball game. I Luke and Leia's connection is kind of explored, and we don't know that they're brother and sister yet. They kind of flirtatious, but not really. I don't think some people like, oh, they're like making out in Empire. Their brothers done that. No, they're not really. They have like that one kiss, but it's really just to make Han jealous. I I like their connection though. I really like that scene where Leia says they have to go back, and where he's reaching out to her. Just the emotional desperation of Luke. Mark Hamill just does such an amazing job in that moment, and of course the whole movie. But ultimately, you're talking an A+ movie here. Um, it's so good. There's so much that's been said about it. I kind of struggling to come up with more to say because it's just it is that good, for sure.
Well, there's definitely a lot of impact in that finale, and just the like moodiness of it, and the like you said, the sound design taking over, but just the pacing of it too. And I mentioned the movie being fast paced, but it also knows when to pause
Right.
and to kind of just allow the mood to settle, and that's a huge moment for it there. The weight of it is incredible because it's not just about the reveal of parentage. It's also Luke coming to realize, like, I don't know, his own fallibility, his own need for patience, and to kind of heed some of those lessons that he's ignoring. It's like, oh yeah, I've been trained, I'm good, and it's like, no, buddy, you don't know nearly enough yet. And if you think about it in the span of the entire saga, it's really funny, like how little training Luke has compared to like how the Jedi used to be.
Right.
And Yoda's like, "You're too old,"
Yeah.
or saying to Obi Wan that he's too old to be trained. But he's obviously got innate talent and so forth. But uh, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. But I'm gonna have to tease a little bit of like sequel talk, just in a sense that it's one thing if you have your own dislike of the sequel trilogy or not caring for particular movies or what have you, but some people will pick on like Ray as not being advanced and being too advanced too quickly in some regards. And I'm thinking, have you not seen the original trilogy where Luke is a farm boy, but he does an awful lot pretty fast compared to like a lot of people having more training around him. And Ray grew up on a planet where she's, picking up scrap and having to fend for herself and already knowing how to fight. We don't get any of that with Luke outside of obviously knowing that he's a good pilot. But in terms of being like a good fighter, I have no reason to believe he'd already be a good fighter. Certainly not a Jedi and trained in using the Force. He is so ill prepared when he steps into the finale. And obviously finding out the full history of who Vader is to him just enhances that idea. But you remove that idea, and it's still great drama and still very personal and raw. Yeah, I do think it's kind of funny, like how fast he has a mechanical hand, but obviously made the assumption of a little bit of time jumping around.
Right.
But it's just like, oh, yep, now he's got a hand again. A lot better than his father's hand
Yeah.
in Attack of the Clones. So I guess obviously there's some sign of technology advancing in the world, even though so much else is like very scrappy. Empire leaving things in ruins. Um, but yeah, obviously you're right about John Williams' score in particular and how it has so many themes that have become a huge part of what Star Wars is and what people think of in Star Wars music, and not always people knowing that it hasn't always existed. Like that it was built upon as he went.
Right.
The Imperial March being chief among those things. And no, that's from Empire, not from the original Star Wars.
Right.
and now it's just Star Wars. It's a Star Wars theme played as often as anything, really. But yes, it's Empire Strikes Back is an easy A plus, no question about it. But I also think, even though I say no question about it, I think that's true of the entire original trilogy. So that's my Return of the Jedi review. A plus. No, I'd say a little bit more, but I suppose it's time to move on to Return of the Jedi.
Return for the climactic clash between the forces of good and evil. Return to a galaxy far, far away. Return of the Jedi. The next chapter in the continuing Star Wars saga.
Major Crop!
The quest continues. The circle closes. The saga lives on. Return of the Jedi.
I think it's funny because I obviously we both of us we grew up with the original trilogy, and I've heard people say that depending on what age you were, you might appreciate the Ewoks less or more. Just maybe if you saw them when you were a kid, you have less issues with them.
Right.
Which I guess I can't really respond to that completely because I grew up with them, so I can't say too much. But I'd like to think I have a critical eye.
Right.
And I still love the Ewoks. So
Yeah.
there are things that I saw when I liked when I was a kid that I don't care for so much anymore. I still love the Ewoks, and I think they're a great bit of fun. But Return of the Jedi obviously starts out on Tatooine, and starts out in Jabba's palace, and I love the way this movie opens so much. And it can't help but make me wonder what if David Lynch had directed it among the people that might have been attached to this at one point or could have directed it if they chose to. At the same time, I love the opening stretch of this movie that reminds me in some ways of the opening of the first Star Wars movie, but simply because it doesn't bother to like handhold you in the storytelling, and it's so kind of strange and disparate in its tone. It takes time for you to even like figure out like who's the focus here, who's the main characters. It's just kind of dropping you into this world, and obviously we start with 3PO and R2D2 and start in their focus, and only gradually do we get to, oh look, and there's Leia and Han and Lando's there, and then we get Luke walking in, which is still one of my favorite moments in the entire saga, when Luke walks into Jabba's palace.
Right.
There's just something that's so cool about it, and he's obviously changed so much since the events of Empire. It's really cool. It really does feel like Return of the Jedi right there, and not that his arc is complete, but that he still very much exudes the lessons from Empire, being confident, being a Jedi, but also like having this in the background of his mind, like a little bit more patience. But I just can't get over how much I love the different pieces of Return of the Jedi, and at the same time, I mentioned like Empire having so many different sights and sounds compared to the first one. Well, Return of the Jedi, I think, it's still got a lot of unique stuff, but amusingly, it's almost like easier stuff in the sense of oh, now we're back on the desert planet.
Right.
And what about unique sites of the forests that are already there in California? So they don't have to go that far. But the biggest thing that they did was the space battle, and at the end, which is obviously we're in a different world now in terms of computer effects, but
Yeah.
the amount of ships that they have on screen at one time is insane for 1983. I mean, absolutely. Like, that's something you really have to like look at context and to understand what they did in terms of, having that many different effects happening at the same time. So many ships superimposed all at once, flying around or coming out of hyperspace, and just it's insane and incredible the amount of work that they did to make that happen. And of course, as far as like action sequences, things like the speeder bike chase, which is still one of my favorite action sequences in all of Star Wars. It's just brilliantly executed all around from a technical level, but also just in general, the movie is, I think, just a super fun adventure. Like, if I'm picking it, like, what is my favorite Star Wars movie? At one time, it's been Return of the Jedi. It has been Return of the Jedi, and a big part of that is like, well, I love the entire original trilogy, but if I have to pick a favorite, maybe I have to pick apart some of my favorite moments. And Return of the Jedi has many of my favorite moments. I love the opening in Jabba's palace, and I love the speeder bike chase. And it also happens to have what is my favorite lightsaber fight of the entire series. You asked way back on Phantom Menace, or not, didn't ask me directly, but you mentioned if that's your favorite lightsaber duel, which I can't fault you for, obviously, in any way, shape, or form. Uh, Not the least of which because it's your subjective opinion, but
Right.
even outside of that, like, that lightsaber duel is incredible. But I'd love a lightsaber duel in Return of the Jedi. It's just, I mentioned, Luke walking in with confidence at the beginning of the story, but it's not like his storyline is finished or that he has it all figured out. And even at the opening sequence, he runs into trouble, which is really fun to see. But then you get to, the finale where the emotions of it all kind of boil up. And I just love the way that they deal with Luke's own arc and him coming to terms with himself and with becoming a Jedi and what that means. And it's not just about being a good fighter, that's part of what I love about it. It's, I'm better than you. It's not that at all. It's actually, interestingly, a lot more calm and peaceful underneath. And at the same time, like, you see him like walk into the whole battle trying to bring his father over to the light side, and at the same time there's that tension boiling underneath him as well that gets brought out by the Emperor, which I mentioned Ian McDiarmid before being incredible in the prequels and getting that tour de force in Revenge of the Sith.
Right.
But his official introduction into the story was here. Ian McDiarmid's part, when he was first introduced as Palpatine, was for this movie. And he's just an intensely memorable presence. Nobody's there trying to win his soul over, so that would be an interesting story. Palpatine turned to the dark side, or when did he turn? The Palpatine early years. Maybe he's always been evil. But I just absolutely love that dynamic of Luke and Vader in the ending, and how that, obviously brings into a fight that is also very well staged, and the production design there, uh, with the throne emperor looking over everything. Again, going into some industrial stuff too. It's always been a Star Wars thing. But in terms of design, or where they are, or where Palpy ends up. But yeah, this movie has like all these different layers. On one hand, just it's a fun action adventure, but I think it sometimes gets overlooked for what it still has in terms of emotional storyline. You could question, like, in and of itself, like, should it have done more with like Han and Leia? But I don't think what it does with them is bad by any means. And it's actually a really fun storyline. And that's without obviously questioning one way or the other what happens to their characters in the sequel trilogy. But I I still think what happens is well done. Uh, I guess I'm almost tempted to say more about it, but I turn it over to you and see like your impressions about this movie, but also specifically your feelings about what happens to some of the characters.
Well, like Jedi is one of those that I've always kind of thought got a bad rap from people the last decade or so because, well, really, I mean, honestly, at this point, it's probably been more like 15 years, but 15, 20 years, but it's kind of been like a prominent opinion that it's the weak link in the series or in the original trilogy, and that it's not just, I mean, and some people, it's not even just the Ewoks. Like, they just trash several elements of it. But I think that this is one of the best, well, you know, now I have to put an asterisk by this because it's technically not the conclusion anymore. But to this trilogy, this is one of the best endings, best conclusions ever. Uh, because as you said, it does have the action and it does deliver on that and the adventure and the thrills. But on an emotional level and narrative level, it is very satisfying. And I think, as you said, I think that gets overlooked. And I think that your opinion that the lightsaber duel is the best is not wrong at all, because when it comes to the ones from this trilogy, it's between Empire and Jedi for me. For those, I can't decide for different reasons, but the one in Jedi is so good because of the emotions, and the imagery is great too, with Palpatine looking on. But and just that clash of the green and red, it just looks so cool. I love Luke's green lightsaber. I've been on uh record saying that in our Mandalorian reviews. Uh, but no, that it's just so cool. I love that moment when in the Jabba sequence at the Sarlacc pit when he ignites it for the first time. When he gets R2 to launch it out, it's just really cool moment. One of my favorite moments of the whole saga. Just cool moment. But anyway, going back to the, the lightsaber duel, it's just running on all these emotions because you don't know how it's going to turn out. Luke's trying to save Anakin, but they're trying to seduce Luke to the dark side. And of course, Palpatine's old go to is, have one apprentice until you don't need him anymore and have the new apprentice kill the old apprentice off. And, Vader was the ultimate apprentice until he got all messed up by Obi-Wan and kind of became a half machine, half man, and just not really, even though he is powerful and is dangerous and, you know, but still not functioning quite as well as he would be if that all of that had not happened. Plus, he's also older, and Luke is young and has these raw abilities and isn't indoctrinated completely by the Jedi because, as you mentioned, he hasn't really had the full training course. He's kind of had a Cliff's Notes training. Um, it doesn't have to, Palpatine wouldn't really have to work that hard around a lot of Jedi indoctrination to get him in. Um, but there's so much riding in that lightsaber duel, and the music too. Just that choir, that really um, kind of somber choral music. It's really good. It really delivers in that last charge that Luke has against Vader. And I got it, since we're there talking about this scene, I got to talk about what was I was talking about earlier. Of course, the moment in Jedi when Vader's looking, Luke's essentially dying. Uh, Gosh, I'll go ahead and talk about this. I got another thing I got to talk about too, but um, he's essentially dying because Palpatine's hitting him with the Force lightning, and Vader's kind of going back. He's just looking back and forth, and you're kind of seeing it from Vader's perspective in a way that he's looking at his son. Son he never really knew, that's about to be taken away from him, and maybe looking at the light side of his soul, and then looking back at Palpatine and that quiet kind of inner turmoil, and then ultimately he makes the sacrificial move of throwing Palpatine down the shaft, and Palpatine gets the shaft. uh, but no, he does that, and it's just such a beautiful moment because of that. Because then and then they added him screaming no. Um, I think that was in the Blu-ray changes initially.
I'm pretty sure that's where it started. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I knew that had happened, but I'd never watched it, and I watched it the other day just to see it, and I do not like that because I think a lot of what makes that emotionally ring so true is the quietness. Like you don't, what's he about to do? And then when he like moves forward and all of a sudden picks Palpatine up, it's just this amazing moment. And then not that it changes anything, but Vader just yelling no kind of takes all the subtlety and nuance to it. It just throws it out the window. Um, it's still the same result, but I think I prefer, uh, not just because it's what I know and what I've grown up with, but I just like, as someone who knows what they like and don't like, that's what I prefer, is the original version. But there's just so much in that scene, that whole sequence. Luke, I think his ultimate decision to throw his lightsaber to the side is just like this. I think it's the ultimate moment in this saga because he, you know, in the face of certain death, chooses what he thinks is right and pays the price. He would die. I mean, if it wasn't for Vader's choice, he would die. I mean, it's pretty simple. He has no defense against Palpatine. Um, but he still, even though he's succumbed to his emotions and is very vulnerable, and like you said, he's been revealed to be fallible, like in Empire, and I think he knows that now in Jedi and is aware of it. But it's very heroic. And not just, it's not just he saves the day. No, the most heroic thing he does here is basically give himself up to die. And I think that's a really just incredible statement. The scene between Luke and Vader where he takes his mask off just never ceases to touch me emotionally, and I think it's another just like all of these scenes that I've mentioned of just, well, it really speaks to the other levels this movie works on other than just being pure fun and adventure, because it is that, but it also very much has all these moments. And I think like Luke really, there is a happy ending there in a way, but it's also got a little bittersweetness, the bitterness to the sweetness as well, because Luke really kind of has a somber conclusion, and you know he's kind of lonely, and I like that. Kind of the loneliness of the hero, because a lot of times they'll just have the heroic character have a love interest, and not for any other reason, just to have some romance to the story. But Luke never had that in this, and I think that really kind of adds to his character, and I love that about it. It doesn't did nothing gets taken away from it, and when he's burning Vader's body, it's just between the music and everything else, it's just such a powerful moment. And when he sees the spirits of Yoda, Obi-Wan, and Anakin, and people can get mad about Hayden Christensen being added in the other ones, but it doesn't really bother me as much as it used to. I was a little irritated about it at first, but I don't necessarily uh, have as much to throw at it as I used to. But again, like a lot of these things, I'm going to say I prefer the original version. Um, but anyway, just it's what an ending, what a great ending, and for Luke. Talk about other things in this movie. I don't have a problem with the Ewoks either. I, in fact, love them, and I love their culture, and I love their villages, and I think it's so cool. That was one of the things I loved when I was a kid, uh, and I still do. I just love the forest, tree houses, and everything else that that are in this movie in Endor. I love the forest moon of Endor, and yes, it's just the Redwood National Forest, but it's just so cool. Um, One of the best planets in this whole series, and I just love it. And the like you said, the speeder bike chase sequence is just amazing. I mean, it's very cool. But I also love the Battle of Endor on the ground. You got the ATSTs and the Ewoks battling them and using their little tricks up their sleeve to kind of trip up the speeder bikes, um, and then throwing rocks and hitting them with sticks. Just a lot of fun. And yeah, some people may not like that, and I can see why. It is kind of silly in a way, but a lot of stuff in Star Wars is silly if you just look at it on a surface level. But I do like the Ewoks as kind of like this, not as advanced civilization, uh, overpowering the Empire. And originally Lucas wanted it to be Kashyyyk and be the Wookiees, but we ended up doing the Ewoks, and I think that that's fine. I actually am kind of glad it was the Ewoks, and you might hear a little Ewok in the background of my son's up here. But no, like I think there's just something pure and fun about the Ewoks, and I don't mind them at all. And I just love the Battle of Endor all around. Like we talked about, you talked about how many ships are on screen at the same time. Yeah, incredible production and design, and this one is just as good as Empire, I think, in a lot of ways. Like especially in terms of the spaceships and everything. And I did not mention an Empire, and I wanted to, and it just kind of slipped my mind. Like the Super Star Destroyer, the Executor, the Vader's ship, just incredible. It's so cool. Like the first time you see it in Empire, when it like overshadows all the other Star Destroyers, just incredible scale. But I love it in the Battle of Endor when you have this kind of kamikaze A-wing pilot take it down, and it crashes into the Death Star, and just an amazing part. And Admiral Akbar bows his head like he's the one that did it. He's humbled. I love Admiral Akbar. Very cool character. I like him. Of course, there's the meme. It's a trap. Before it even was a meme, there were memes. It's a trap was a internet staple for a long time. And interestingly enough, Admiral Akbar was being considered to be a replacement mascot for Ole Miss Rebels when they were going to get rid of the Colonel Reb for obvious Civil War racial reasons. They were going to choose Admiral Akbar because A, he's a rebel. B, he's just cool. So that would have been cool. Ultimately, Lucas did not approve of a university in Mississippi using Admiral Akbar as the mascot. Uh, he had a really funny letter he wrote about it. It's pretty great, but there's just a lot of great things about this movie in terms of creature design. Jabba the Hutt, you talked about the CG Jabba just kind of being like, why? Because the puppet Jabba is just so great. And you had like, I can't remember, Jesse, was it like 6 people operating him or 3? I know there were at least 3.
I don't know
Because
for a fact, but yeah, it's a lot.
I remember I had that documentary From Star Wars to Jedi, that was with like my original VHS set. It showed, and they had some like little people doing the puppetry because they could fit in there inside the Jabba puppet. But it's just incredible. And then all the different kinds of creatures and Salacious Crumb, hilarious. What a great puppet. And then you got Bib Fortuna. One of the things Lucas was really disappointed with in A New Hope was the way Mos Eisley Cantina scene turned out, because they had like, he wanted all these aliens and had a certain thing in mind of how it would play out, and it would be like this, big fantastic scene, and ultimately the production design kind of failed his vision, and it kind of looked cheap to him. And I think the Mos Eisley Cantina scene's great. Are some of the aliens in it a little cheap looking? Yes.
The astronaut.
Yeah, you got the astronaut, you got the praying mantis. You got all kinds of stuff. It is silly, but it works because of what's going on in that scene. And man, what a return to form. What a way to end up getting what you want, because Jabba's palace is one of the coolest sequences. Like everything about it. Like you said, Luke walking in with the cloak and taking the hood back. That's one of the great entrances of any. I was a young man. I still am, I guess. I was a young little boy the first time I saw this. So Princess Leia in the slave girl outfit, for risk of sounding heterosexual, it was very appealing to me, and it, you know, I'd be lying if I said it wasn't still. I think a lot of the things that Carrie Fisher has had to say about that, about trying to fit in that and wear it, and her insecurities or about it were just really funny. But a lot of people think that it's sexist, and um, you know, I don't really think it is. Jabba is, and he uses her as a slave, but he gets his comeuppance from her, and she ends up killing him. The Sarlacc pit sequence is just fantastic. From Luke getting the lightsaber to Han and Lando kind of being reunited, um, helping each other out. Well, Han saves Lando. You got Chewie doing his thing. Boba Fett, Boba Fett, Boba Fett. Where? Uh, Boba Fett's quote unquote demise is still pretty funny. It's even funnier like in the special edition or other editions where he like obviously gets eaten uh, by one of the tentacles. I think where this one succeeds is the heart of it, and all the characters really have a satisfying kind of conclusion to their arcs in this. And you know another big emotional moment is when Luke reveals to Leia who she is to him. And you know there's just kind of this emotional moment from both of them, and the connection there, the scenes they have together, it's it's really well done. And Carrie Fisher does an amazing job in this movie too, and she's done a great job in all of them. And but the way she reacts to Luke, um, and kind of the sadness that she shows, it just really touching. And that's what this movie really has is a lot of heart on top of all the thrills and all the adventure. Um, I don't have anything negative to say about Return of the Jedi. Not really. I think it is just like this grand conclusion. Um, I maybe I wouldn't have wanted the sequels to happen. That's not really for me to say, because I didn't hate everything that happened in them. We'll talk about it soon, because I did actually like one of them. Uh, I just wasn't crazy. Well, kind of hit and miss on one of them, and just really did not like one of the others. But I think they made some interesting choices about what happened next, and I'll go into more detail on that. But as far as where we leave things, I kind of like where things end up because you know Luke kind of has this open ended future ahead of him where he could make whatever he wanted to out of his connection to the Force. He doesn't have a trainer anymore. He doesn't have you know Vader or Palpatine out there after him anymore. It just could go any direction, and ultimately we see where that goes. But for so long not knowing where that will go, it was just a really great place to leave it on. But yeah, Return of the Jedi A+, no brainer there. This is just really fun and another great entry to this trilogy that is just pretty much almost flawless as a trilogy, honestly.
Well, you mentioned obviously Leia and this kind of underlying sadness at points, and I really do think her character is well executed in Return of the Jedi. In that sense, I really think that scene is beautiful where she talks to Luke. Beautifully shot and just done well between the actors as well. But a lot has been made about like, oh, should Han have died in this movie? And I don't think that was necessary. I understand in a certain sense, like, what is Han's arc in this movie? And it's like, well, yeah, I guess he doesn't really have a big arc if you're looking for that emotional journey for him. Uh, but was it strictly necessary? And I still like his character in this movie. I think he's a fun character throughout. He's very much Han Solo throughout. I think it's very funny when he's tied up with the Ewoks and blowing the fire. Uh, a lot of really good moments. He's a great character all throughout, and it's not like he's without any emotion. It's just if you were going to try to say what's Han's motivation, like, well, I suppose you could pick on that, but it's not Han's movie either. I don't think that's a detriment. I think his character ends up in a good place. So if you're going to look at like where does this leave our characters, I think it leaves them all in a good place. And if you look at it as an arc of a trilogy, I think seeing Han end up here with Leia, that's a good place to end the story. Obviously, if you look at that as an ending point, uh, I think that's a perfectly valid way to wrap up all these characters' journeys. And yes, Luke's story is the dominant one in terms of the emotional arc of the entire trilogy. And in this movie in particular, having that kind of boiling rage underneath, all the doubt and feelings about himself and feelings about what that means related to his father, and possibly even thinking about not necessarily wanting to be the emperor, but thinking about how far he could take his own power. Like these things that are kind of running under the surface that it kind of all reach that boiling point. That's fantastic, all the way up to him making that final decision of, like you mentioned, tossing the lightsaber aside. What a way to end that storyline, all the way up to Vader making his sacrifice too. I don't think anybody could have predicted that after the first movie. That's a excellent way to wrap up that whole series. So, Return of the Jedi is an easy A plus for me. I love it as as an entry in the original trilogy. Is just a Star Wars movie all around, uh, unto itself. And it's not like when we talk about the Ewoks, it's not like uh, they are just cute. They actually get story, and they actually have death and sacrifice on their part too. And there's interest in terms of, and sure, it's funny, but thinking about uh, looking up to a god in 3PO, that whole tribal instinct and being scared of 3PO's power.
Right.
Uh, that's really well done. I love 3PO telling the story of up to that point too.
Yeah.
That's a great moment.
The
And
sound
awesome
effects are
sound. Yeah.
hilarious. Chimity jadoom.
Thinking about real quick, like special edition changes that Jabba's sequence, that whole musical number they threw in there. It's so silly, and at the same time, I kind of love it.
Yeah, I agree with
Um,
that.
I might still prefer the original cut, but it's fine. It's fun,
Yeah,
and it feeds into that whole crazy energy and the way that whole opening sequence builds up to the Sarlacc pit. It's so amazing, like that the music too,
yeah,
um, just pitch perfect right there leading up to the launch of the lightsaber from R2D2. A great action sequence, but also just that culminating moment where everything kind of just congeals there. And it's not like there hasn't been action before that point. Uh, Obviously, with a whole monster battle before that. But how about the very, very ending where they're celebrating, and it used to be, of course, what people call Yub Nub,
yes,
um, and now in the special edition versions, it has that other music track that also looks at different places in the galaxy celebrating the fall of the Empire.
right.
And I kind of love the special edition music and the kind of somberness of it as well. Uh, I kind of really dig that as a choice, even though I love the Yub Nub song with the Ewoks.
Yeah,
Um, I mean, if I had to pick my poison, I'd probably still pick Yub Nub. but I really do actually love uh, the newer version too. Not just because it spans across the galaxy and gives us different places celebrating, so that you get that sense of the galaxy, but really just because of the tonality of the music as well. I think it fits the finale, emotionally. I don't know if you listened to that track recently.
yeah. I did for this. I listened to the score the other day, and yeah, I like that track too, and I like that ending too. It's kind of a toss up. I honestly don't think I have a preference because I think either one works. You know, Yub Nub's fun. Uh, I actually like the way the score builds in the Yub Nub at the end and has like that coda with the chorus, um, the choir that joins in. Um, it's really great. That builds right into the end credits. Just you know, but I do like the well, it's not new now, but the special edition version too, because it does, like you said, it does kind of have the little more sadness, not necessarily sad sounding, but it does have a little more somber tone, but it's also celebratory at the same time. I think I think, and it is cool to see the other planets, and of course, this has changed multiple times because special edition it had, um, Tatooine, Bespin, and then it did show Coruscant before we even knew. It had seen Coruscant. That was like the first time that anybody had seen Coruscant. But then the DVD version they added Naboo as well. So very cool, very very fun way to end the trilogy. I think I've going with what you said about Han, and I'll talk more about this when we talk about Force Awakens. But I've always kind of been annoyed by that Han has to die idea in Return of the Jedi. And I think, like, in a lot of ways, since Lucas wasn't really involved with Force Awakens, it's like they turn around, like, yeah, we're going to make it happen this time. And, but in Return of the Jedi, I just don't really think it's necessary at all, or was necessary. Like, Harrison Ford, it's like he's got in the documentary. He's got no mama. He's got no papa. Okay, so people that don't have parents deserve to die. Is that what you're saying? you know, like, what does that even mean? Uh, like, just shut up, Harrison Ford. We know you hate Star Wars, uh, but you show up for a check. So, uh, but anyway, I did think that of the characters that probably have the least impact on the story in Return of the Jedi, Han is probably the one, but he still has great moments. I mean, and like you said, like the stuff with the Ewoks, and like when they get caught up in that, or him in the battle, really, because he does a lot of cool stuff. And when they finally break into the shield generator, just, it's kind of Han being heroic, and it's really really good. um Lando's fun. I love him and Ian Nub's kind of buddy cop adventure in the Battle of Endor, and kind of the unsung hero of the whole trilogy, Wedge Antilles, getting to kind of have the coup de grace on the Death Star, uh, after being a great hero and helping Luke in A New Hope, and the Battle of Hoth. Um, get to see Wedge kind of have his big moment. Um, very cool, and that space battle is just incredible. Like, can't say it enough. Just so much cool stuff going on. So yeah, the great conclusion, great way to end a trilogy, a great way to end a story, and you know, I think the revisionist history will eventually kind of subside, and I think people will come back to it, uh, and look at it like out of without, because I think eventually all the internet opinions and things will lose sway, and I think people eventually will look at movies with their own eyes and minds again. And I think Return of the Jedi will get its due eventually. But even if it doesn't, I still think it's great.
I've definitely always enjoyed it, and I maybe defend is a strong word, but I do defend it from some of the takes that people have about it being a lesser film in the saga or in the original trilogy. Even I think it stands firm, it stands tall. I'd like to mention too briefly just the fact that obviously we're watching these movies in story order, and I feel like this is one of the biggest impacts for me in watching it in story order. Is like, sure, the original trilogy, it has a feel of its own in some ways. Not to say that it doesn't feel like Star Wars in other places, but these movies obviously have their own feel. But at the same time, you watch it and you've seen Anakin and you saw Anakin fall all the way up to the conclusion here for his story. I think it really has an impact.
Yeah,
It definitely does for me. Like
I agree. Yeah,
jumping from the tragedy of Revenge of the Sith and then seeing the redemption here at this moment. Uh, it affects the way you watch it to to have seen that journey, which I guess it works. Some people had that machete order
yeah,
of watching episodes 4 or 5 and then watching the original trilogy before watching Return of the Jedi,
right.
or watching the prequel trilogy before Return of the Jedi. But uh, I've never really been a fan of that idea, I guess.
No,
um, but regardless of which, I do think it has an impact on Return of the Jedi to have seen that journey. Um, Having said all of that and shared our love for both of these movies on this episode, next episode we're doing our episode 7 and 8 double feature, uh, talking Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, and uh, there's been mostly agreement from both of us on these movies up to this point, and I guess uh, it'll be interesting in a way to have a discussion about these sequel movies.
I can guarantee we will not have a single letter grade be the same for
Yeah,
for
no, I
any of
think
these.
that's 100%.
Um, but it'll be fun because I honestly haven't really been able to fully kind of express my take on it uh, to anyone really. Just kind of in passing, so it'll be nice to kind of just say what I want to say. But it also will not be for anyone listening that thinks I'm just gonna hate on them and trash and dunk on them and say what you've usually read on Twitter or somewhere else. Like, no, I don't really agree with a lot of the things that other people don't like about these movies. I had kind of my own problems with it, and the one I like the least is not the one the internet trolls like the least. So, in fact, that's the one I like the most. So it's it's interesting, and and I'm gonna watch them again. And I've seen Force Awakens a few times. I've seen Last Jedi a few times. I've only seen Rise of Skywalker once, so this will be the um, second time for me to view it. And I'm interested to see where I fall on all of them. Again, I'm pretty sure I know where I'm going to on all of them, but that's kind of the beauty of watching them again, is just to kind of reaffirm, or even maybe find out you appreciate something you didn't think you did. So
Well, also, I think it's fun to have a discussion,
yeah,
uh, and like a genuine discussion, and not like the internet can be,
right,
where everybody's just yelling at each other and not really talking about the substance of their subjective views.
right,
Uh, that's where a lot of times there isn't substance to some people's arguments, because either love or hate, people don't always talk about what that means.
right,
I not to go on for too much longer, but I've reviewed all of the Lucasfilm movies on my blog. So not just Star Wars and Indiana Jones and the big titles, but all the oddities too. The
yeah,
lot of unique movies that Lucasfilm produced over time, which again, that's where George Lucas kind of went to, was uh, running the company, but also like supporting artists and doing movies like Mishima, Life in Four Chapters, which is one of my favorite movies I think I've ever seen. It blew me away. Did I animated Twice Upon a Time, which is just so bizarre and unique. So many unique Lucasfilm movies out there beyond just what people know. But uh, at the same time, that means I've also reviewed the Star Wars movies and definitely said my piece about all the Star Wars, but especially the sequel trilogy. And uh, having said that, it'll be fun to have a discussion with you about that and all my feelings, and just to revisit them in general. I think it's a good thing to, uh, I guess, be able to critically evaluate for good and ill about all, different things, different movies, and actually break it down that way. Um, so a lot to discuss as we move forward here. But I'll see you on the flip side when the Force does awaken.
Yes, indeed.
In the meantime, may the Force be with you, friend.
And you as well.
See everyone next time on Movie Marathon Mood.